Okay, at this time, I'd like to call the August the 11th meeting of the Anderson County Charter Commission to order, and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Fritz. Commissioner Smallridge.
Here.
Commissioner Isbell.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Meade.
Here.
Commissioner Bochamp. Chairman Stonezover.
Present.
Five present, two absent.
Okay, at this time, would you please stand for the prayer led by Commissioner White and the pledge of Commissioner Meade.
Let's pray. Dear Lord, our Heavenly Father, we humbly ask that you would look into this meeting today, that you would help us, that you would help us decipher what we need to do, what we need to accomplish here today. We ask you, God, for guidance with your Holy Spirit. We ask you to bless everyone in the room. We ask you, God, that you would accept our eagerness to get this done and present it to the people, and we pray that your will would be done. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge to the flag. Hand salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
I may come back this way. It's all public meeting.
Yes.
Okay, next, I hope everyone had a chance to read the minutes from Tuesday's meeting. Any corrections or objections to the minutes? If not, do I hear a motion for approval?
So moved.
Moved- Moved and second to approve the minutes. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. This is where we have the appearance of citizens, and seeing none here to address the commission. We'll go on to the next item on the agenda, and I guess at this point, I need to tell you that we have 5 present. It's 5 out of 7. Since we only have 7 members at the present time, why 4 is required for a quorum and 4 to pass anything that we vote on. Hopefully that'll change by our meeting next Tuesday. Okay, the review of the Declaration of Rights.
Okay, well, I had made some comments on this in the past, but basically, my feeling about adding this as part of the charter is that it duplicates what's already exists in state law to some extent, but it also, by adding it to the charter, it makes it clear that the county recognizes the state constitution is in fact part of what our oath of office, and is required of us to support and, the Constitution of the State of Tennessee, along with the Constitution of the United States. And so having things in ours that parallels the state constitution doesn't really add any new requirements, but it does clarify that the people that that govern this state and this city and our county, and recognize their obligations to comply with the state constitution in all its parts. So I would make the motion that it be added just as an appendix to the charter. It's there to be looked at, and it would become officially part of the charter. Okay. But it would be a part that could never be really changed unless the Constitution itself was changed.
That's true, it's just an opinion.
Second.
Motion made and second to include the review of Declaration of Rights as an appendix. Is that right? To the charter.
That's correct. It's just as an appendix, it would just be listed in there. It's not even referenced in the main body of the charter at all.
No.
On that, if I may, would you like it to be referenced in the body? I've had thought about if we were going to reference it, we could reference it.
Simply add it as, that it's listed as an appendix,
Right.
in the appendix name.
So if you see section 1.05 on page 7, rights reserved to the people, I could simply state there, the Anderson County Declaration of Rights is attached here too as Appendix A and is incorporated by reference herein.
To Appendix A, is that what you said?
Appendix A, B, C, either or, whatever comes in order.
Yeah, it would just be in there as an appendix,
Okay.
along with the other two.
Any other discussion? Okay. I guess we'll have a vote.
A question about appendix, though, it was, I look back to the page I have here, which is the draft 8822, for Appendix A and Appendix B in the, where it's listed in the front, it doesn't give the name of Appendix A or Appendix B or Appendix C, or those are actually end up being there?
It says A and B right now.
Yeah, it just says A and B, and then we're just gonna put Appendix C?
Well, if we referenced it in section 1.05, that would be the first part of the charter to reference an appendix, so that would become Appendix A, and then Appendix B would be the private acts that are being kept.
Oh, okay.
Appendix C, it would just shift down, is how I understand it.
Yeah, just say,
That'd be fine.
yeah, see Appendix C, right
Mhm.
there in
Yeah.
105.
Mhm.
Any other discussion? That's the clerk call the roll for the vote. On adding the,
Commissioner Smallridge,
Aye.
Commissioner Isbell,
Aye.
Commissioner White, Commissioner Meade,
Aye.
Chairman Stovall.
aye.
4.
Thank you, gentlemen.
5,
For it,
Yeah.
and the 2 absent.
yes. So. Mr.
Yeah,
Snelson,
5 and 2 absent. Yeah.
you're on.
The other thing I think Jay had mentioned on Tuesday was the list of departments and authorities and commissions in Anderson County. If you all wanted that to be included as an appendix
Yeah,
also.
In that, if I speak, in that other counties that have had charter governments have had difficulties afterwards from the courts, and that they said, gee, some part of government wasn't mentioned the way we think it should, or it wasn't
Mhm.
clearly noted or something. Even though that doesn't really add new information, it's kind of like this, it doesn't add any new information.
Mhm.
It would avoid any criticism in the event that people approve this.
Mhm.
I don't think I'd want to make a bet either way on this thing, okay, as far as the approval by the public.
Yeah.
But I think having it in there
Mhm.
gives us a little bit of protection in depth from questions that some office wasn't mentioned and therefore our whole charter is void. You know, how the state courts can do. And that's happened, right, with the,
Well, I'll mention so what we're talking about here is in some Attorney General opinions, and there's been one case, and the Attorney General opinions are based on the case. The case came out of Knox County. Whenever Knox County wrote its charter in 1988 and it was passed in 1990, I believe it was the Register of Deeds, the provision for the Register of Deeds, the qualifications or the compensation or the method of election was left out. It wasn't mentioned. And the chancellor down there found that because the charter statutes required a charter commission to include all of that stuff, it was basically defective, and they basically found that a charter government still existed de facto, but not de jure, if you will. Yes, I think it's good. I think everything that we've included here with respect to the constitutional officers, the state officers, the county officers, that's all provided for. You know, it's a little bit questionable whether we need to get as detailed when it comes down to departments and subcommittees and agencies and all that within the executive branch. But I see no harm in including it. It can only help. So that's my thought. I don't think you're going to lose anything by not including it, but I think you can only strengthen the charter, the validity of the charter by including it.
Well, if some of these were eliminated, say by budget cuts or something, they're not necessarily constitutional offices.
Mhm.
Could that be done even if they're in the charter?
Well, if we included it in, say we included it in Appendix D or B in the charter, a list of all the offices, we would list in the charter somewhere, we would make reference to the appendix and say the offices listed in Appendix B as they exist on the effective date of the charter, September 1st, 2026, those are in existence, just to protect. So if something falls off in between, November 8th, 2022 and September 1st, 2026, it's provided for by saying that as they exist on the effective date in 2026.
Well, before I vote on it, to say if the charter passes and in 2027, one of them or
Mhm.
two or whatever would be eliminated by budget cuts, could the commission go ahead and do that without having to have a change in the charter?
Yes, so what we would also do is, we would have a provision that says the county office, the departments within the executive branch listed in Appendix D as they exist on September 1st, 2026, shall be and remain in effect until and unless amended, repealed,
yeah.
or otherwise changed by the mayor.
Yeah, I believe we already have wording in there that says things
Exact-
like the mayor can
Correct.
reduce her departments and she
So
can,
it's,
without
so,
cause, she can
so
change
we
the
would have a
number of
clause in
people.
there, yes.
And there's already wording for the major departments that they
Okay.
have the authority to reduce their staff.
That was my thinking
And
on how
reduce
that would go.
positions or even whole departments. The
Right.
mayor has that authority.
That's what I wanted to know.
No.
Just for an example of that language, not to overkill here, but 723. It shall, that's the county financial management system, but you could see it being worded something like that on page 38, 7.23. Upon the adoption of this charter, the county financial management system of 1981, as amended, and as in effect in Henderson County on the effective date of this charter, shall continue in full force and effect until and unless such financial policies or practices thereunder are amended. So something like that.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking. Anyway.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the commission?
I think it's a good idea to have it. In addition to what we already said, it also means that if somebody just looks up the charter on the website, okay, and they have that appendix available to them, it allows them to understand in a little bit more depth what some of the stuff in the rest of the charter means. And it answers questions like you just asked. You know, what does this mean right here, where it says that this can still be changed, and it gives a little bit more detail to a smaller, to a little bit lower level, down to some of the departments and what they're allowed to do, instead of just at elected official level. So my motion would be to include this. I think it's advantageous to people being able to look at the charter and understand it, even during the period where people are deciding whether they want to vote for it. I think it's going to be important to have as much information readily available as possible. And I think that would answer some questions that people might have, both now and in the future if it passes.
I'll second. That was a motion.
Yes, my motion was to approve with the little minor wording corrections that were just discussed.
Sure.
Motion made and second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Commissioner Smallridge,
Aye.
Commissioner Isbell,
Aye.
Commissioner White, Commissioner Meade,
Aye.
Chairman Stone's up.
Aye.
That's all five.
I think that's a good move, Tom.
The other things that I have for tonight are, Jay had handed me, and I'm assuming he handed you, a Commissioner Charter Edits document from last meeting, and he went over these. I was just gonna go through and show you that I had made those changes. They are in red line in the draft that I have given tonight.
Okay, was there a new draft handed out tonight? I have the one from the last meeting.
Okay, it's right here.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm
grab
sorry.
me one too. If you've got, you said.
They had them sitting right up front, and I didn't take one, so it's not your fault.
Since you had the underlines and
So this is like an 810 version, or
811.
811, okay.
I have some
Jerry.
changes.
Jerry's
I'm sorry.
not
Wrong person. Got too much going on.
Did you get one, Tim?
I apologize, Mr. White, Commissioner White.
You're starting on what page?
I'm starting on page 7.
Yeah, I see that. That was one of my comments.
That's,
Hey, actually, we discussed that in the last meeting.
yes, and I've made the change. Add and enforce after to adopt there. The next change was section 2.02B. Change comptroller of the treasury, this is on page 8. Change comptroller of the treasury to Tennessee comptroller of the treasury, capital letters.
Okay.
Okay, and what page are we on now here?
8.
On page 8, okay. Yeah, and we talked about that one in the last meeting as well. Good.
On page 9, section J. J last time mentioned that there were rules of the legislative body, the county commission, that he wanted to make discharge of members for good cause shown or pursuant to the rules of the legislative body. That's been inserted there.
Pursuant to rules of the legislative, okay, I worded it slightly different, but I'll change it. Pursuant to the rules of the legislative body.
The next change is on page 10, the bottom. On the legislative body members' salary and compensation. Jay wanted to add in there, and I think the Charter Commission agreed, the clause that the county commission could increase their salary, but could not increase it during the term of the members then on the commission. It would not go into effect until the next term. But as it is in there currently, the current resolution, 1408-509, will still be used. If they wanted to deviate from that, they could, but they could not increase their salary for that term. Would not go into effect. And that's just how it's written in state law. You'll see that on the next page where that ends. Any qualms?
Yeah, there was something on page 12.
I'm sorry?
There was an item on page 12,
Not got-
mid of the page, where it talks about section 202B.
I'm getting there. 1 second.
Oh, okay.
If you want to jump to that, we can. I don't mind.
Take 'em in
I've
order.
made that if you want to go ahead and go to
Let's
it.
go ahead and take them in order.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was thinking
You're fine.
we'd already jumped beyond
You're
it.
fine. On page 11, section 207, removal of the member of the legislative body, and this charter was added there. I think you all got this memorandum that I sent to Jay earlier today.
Right.
A couple of you said you did. It's in your email if he forwarded it to the commission. I talk about that section in here on page 3 if you want to review it. Basically, last meeting there was a concern brought up by Jay, I think, that somebody could get around the recall provision that we include in the charter and have a referendum on a county official. And just use the percentages in the number of signatures required for the petition in the statute, whereas we varied those numbers in this charter, made it more difficult. We think that, I think that's a good question, but we think that argument would be defeated by the fact of, based on the definitions of referendum and recall. Basically, we feel that they're the same thing, essentially, referendum and recall, except referenda deal with action on legislation, like certain policies, and recall deals with a county official or other official. And so if you tried to have a referendum on a county official, by definition, it would be a recall. So then the recall provision in the charter would apply. I hope I'm making a little bit of sense here.
Yeah.
I know
Yep.
it's convoluted, but I think 207 is okay and is worded perfectly as written now that it includes and this charter.
And so we didn't have to add "or this charter" at the end? Or is that what it is? Oh, yeah, okay, and this charter.
And this charter.
Okay, yeah, now I see it. Yeah, and then I had marked my own page, I
Mhm.
thought that was okay.
Gavin, just for
Yes, sir.
clarification, it says on 711,
Mhm.
recall requires a petition for recall to be signed by 20% of the registered voters in Anderson County.
Mhm.
So even if let's say they were gonna wanted to recall me out of my district, it still, in my understanding, it still takes 20% of Anderson County.
District.
Is that correct?
No, I think there's another place where it says that for people that are voted by district, it's 20% of the voters of the district,
The way, sorry, go ahead.
isn't it?
The way it's in there right now is registered to vote in Anderson County. The way I understand the statute is 25151. I think the statute says county as a whole, not the district.
Yeah,
That's what we agreed.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So it would be 20%. Now, state law says 15%. I believe it's 15%. But that's one of those things that you can vary as a charter government.
We can
Um,
exceed it, but we
correct.
can't go less.
Correct, yes, sir. And we've done that. And the other thing that you can change is the 90-day deadline instead of the 75 days. So
Yeah.
that has been done.
Well, the intent was to make removal of an official of the government by referendum a process that would be difficult enough that it couldn't be exercised by a small active group. And I think that was the clear intention of the commission, and I think it's a good idea. And having it being a percentage of the voters and not the percentage that voted in the last election, as we've seen in the last couple of elections. We've had, 20% of the people who registered to vote in the last election voted. Sometimes those vote counts can be pretty small.
Right.
Then if you went to, just counted just district, it could take less than 100 people.
Yeah, right, after if you went by the people that voted in the last election, but if you go by registered voters in the district, then it makes it
Well, this is
more, it would have to be something that clearly the public all agrees on.
It's for the whole county, not just the district.
Yeah, yeah. So it'd have to be something that was very wide acceptance that it was necessary.
Then the next change that I've made is on page 12. 3C. I think Commissioner Mead, this is the one you're talking about. I have changed that to 202J. That's the one where you can dismiss, I think it's the members on the authorities, agencies, and departments and committees of the county commission.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the numbers on the sections got changed, and we didn't change the section in the text.
And I'll say, what was in there, 203B, by way of explanation, that was in there based on the draft that we had of the Knox County Charter, and that was relating to a provision that was applicable in the Knox County Charter, but is not to this charter. It had to do with, I think, Seat A, Seat B kind of thing. So that's been changed.
It was a carryover from an example that we
Sure.
used to get the
Yes.
wording.
On section 4A, right there below, I've added abstain or abstain for cause, consistent with the last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And right there at the bottom on page 12, 4D, Jay wanted meetings of the minutes and motions for every ordinance, emergency ordinance and resolution. He said that's consistent with current practice. On page 13, B4, I've got a big parenthetical there. Tried to give a good definition of ordinance of a penal nature. Like I said last meeting, this first sentence right here is straight out of the charter statutes and state law. All ordinances of a penal nature shall be published at least once in a newspaper of general circulation. Penal ordinance of a penal nature is not really defined, but it is something that punishes, something that imposes a fine or an imprisonment. And so that's what, if it doesn't do that, then it's not an ordinance of a penal nature, and state law does not require it to be published in a newspaper. But I've added there, all other ordinances shall be published on the Anderson County website. I think that was,
Yeah, the ones that are not penal in nature.
Right. or, this does not preclude all of them, including ordinances of a penal nature and all other ordinances generally, to be put on the Anderson County website. Can be.
I guess my comment on that is that it has come to ready knowledge that depending upon the newspapers of general distribution is not a very good way to get the word out to the public, and that there's fewer and fewer and fewer people that actually take the newspaper, and more people that use online and websites to get their information, including the Anderson County website and some of the newspaper websites. But if it's just on the website of a newspaper, I don't know that that would count as being in a newspaper of general distribution. Does that count? If a newspaper that does do a newspaper and distribute it to the public
A
also
website.
has a website that covers the same things, would that count under state law?
Well, if it's published by the newspaper, it's going to be published online, and
Yeah.
it would be published in print as well.
Yeah,
So that
even-
would count.
So
But if
even
it was
they
just
have-
on the
if they have it
website, then I
both,
don't think
yeah.
so, you know?
But
Right.
but everything that's in the paper doesn't necessarily go to their online
Right.
section.
Right. I think that's, I don't know about this really, but I think that's an older method of notice, and I think the print is important for a newspaper. So, anyway. On page 14, this is a big section, and this is generally what this memorandum is about that I sent to Jay. Essentially, so one of the comments in the Commissioner Charter editions from last meeting was that you wanted emergency ordinances to not require 2 readings and not be required to be delivered to commissioners prior to a meeting. So only 1 reading and be able to be brought up and put on the agenda during the meeting, I guess.
Is that one, what you got us said it cannot be vetoed by the mayor?
Well, yes. The one I have, the new one, says it cannot be vetoed by the mayor.
Right.
Yes. And that's what I think this commission has wanted. The memorandum, if it helps, is just, I think, our office's feelings as to whether this is possible. We think it is. Generally, state law does not really go too in-depth about emergency ordinances. There's only 3 statutes that deal with it. They're in the memorandum. It's 51211, which is a charter statute, 62215, 62215, and 632-202. Those deal with cities specifically. Those statutes don't really address whether emergency ordinances need 2 readings or 1 reading. In fact, it says final passage, which may imply that it needs a first and final, different.
You can hand it over easier than I can run around.
Yeah.
There's no, that's the markup.
But on the other
Around
hand,
page 14.
there are private acts for cities in Tennessee that explicitly permit
That's
emergency
what you gave
ordinances.
us a copy of.
Yes. They explicitly permit emergency ordinances to be passed on 1 reading and go into effect immediately. And in fact, Knox County has, in its charter, the ability to pass an emergency ordinance. It doesn't go into effect immediately. It does if it's signed by the mayor. In Knox County, the mayor has the ability to veto an emergency ordinance. It'll go into effect at the signature of the mayor, but it takes 8 days for an emergency ordinance to go into effect in Knox County.
This one's immediately, right?
This one is immediately.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And only one vote.
One vote, one reading. So.
But it has to be unanimous of everybody present, and you have to have
Right, you have
two-thirds
to have two-thirds
of the body
Yes.
present.
present, yeah.
And
I believe Oak Ridge can already do this.
really, okay.
Because they're a home rule.
Yeah,
city.
like I said, a lot of cities have private acts that permit that. John in our office is convinced that, you know, it's somewhere. He was surprised whenever I came back and said, I can't find any statute, you know, explicitly dealing with this. But we think it's possible, but it's just not certain, which is not to say it's not possible. But that's in the memorandum if you want to read that. But the way I have it in there now, it kind of blends what we had. So it says an emergency ordinance shall state that it is so in the caption, contain the statement that it exists. All that was just how it was. Then it requires two-thirds majority. Has to be unanimous, but two-thirds must be present. And that it can be added on the agenda of any meeting, but it still has to be passed by unanimously at least two-thirds of the commission present. And then that 4 there, C4, that is directly out of state law. No ordinance making a grant, renewal, or extension of a franchise, special privilege, regulating the rate to be charged for a service of a public utility shall be passed by emergency ordinance. So,
I think this is really a good thing, even though it is a change. Okay, this is one of the things we would say would be a change the way we do something. It gives us authority to do something we didn't have before. It's excruciatingly difficult and takes overall unanimous consent of two-thirds of the commission, or if everyone's here, everyone has to vote yes. If there's 16 commissioners here, all 16 have to vote yes.
Yeah.
So it takes unanimous vote regardless. That's never going to be used unless there's something that's very clear, convincing, and urgent. And if you had that kind of thing, why not be able to address it instead of saying, oh, God, we can't do anything?
I'll mention, one of the attorneys in our office is the city attorney for another city in Tennessee, and I asked her if they had a provision in their charter for emergency ordinances, and she said, yeah, I think we do. I said, have you ever used it? And I think she's been the city attorney for 15 years, and she said not once, you know, so.
Yeah, I would expect this to be something very unusual.
Yeah. But you can continue to read that section and proofread me. I will shift that number 2 there.
And that
To-
part
to be
4 is important
in
too,
line.
because it
Right.
does allow you to do stuff that it was just neglected for time
Mhm.
and really shouldn't become an emergency.
Right.
And so those things are specifically excluded from being done by an emergency ordinance, and I think that's a good thing to have that added on there.
Um, 210, right there, still on page 14 in section A. Jay mentioned last time, there's a statute that says the mayor cannot veto resolutions exercising administrative or appellate authority. That's included. That's the way it's done currently. In section B, I think I've
Do we
reworded.
need to have a vote on the emergency ordinance section of that change? Or I think we already kind of discussed that, but
Yeah.
we didn't see it.
No, what we decided is, unless somebody objects to it, right here, we just leave it there and then we vote on it when we vote on it.
Okay, fine, that's fine. Pardon me for not keeping up.
No, I mean, does that,
Yeah, that's fine with me. I just didn't want to go by and then have somebody later say, oh, but how about that? Anyhow, that's fine. If it looks like there's, because I think I saw everybody's head nodding on that, so.
Well, I started to call for votes Tuesday, and I think that's what was mentioned. Am I wrong?
No, I think that's right.
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Because these are all things we've discussed
Yeah,
already in the previous meetings. And we're just looking to see that the little changes in the wording we're in the agreement.
In section 210B, still there at the very bottom of page 14, as mentioned last time, first of all, they wanted calendar days, commissioner meeting, I think on calendar days for, like the governor, so that's been added. Also, there was, if you recall, there was a question as to whether the time in B and D on the next page were calculated the same. I think I've made that change now, by
yeah.
changing it to just say past. But I'll say this, instead of making it a little confusing with the 10 days and then the 5 days for the county clerk, and this is also in this memorandum if you want to read it, I've just kind of mirrored what state law has. So Anderson County and the county mayors, the mayor shall return the vetoed resolution or ordinance and the message of veto within 10 calendar days. I just want to make sure that that's what currently happens with Jay.
And that's what we have been doing.
Correct.
And I personally talked with the mayor about the calendar day thing, and she agreed that it was supposed to be calendar day.
The way it was written, if you'll recall, is has to be returned within 10 days, and then the county clerk shall give that to the commission within 5 days. So it was like, is it 10 days or 15 days? So this is just 10 days. Like I said, on page 15D, I think that makes it,
Clarifies it.
of course, yeah, it clarifies. On page 16, there was one of the comments on the commissioner charter edits was delete the word departments from section 3.03E. I've done that there. And I've also included, Jay mentioned that that was done by motion currently. And so
Right.
that's been changed. On the next page, page 17, in the mayor's compensation, it did have equal monthly installments. I've added or consistent with county payroll policy, which is the suggested.
Yeah, that
wording
allows her to
there.
get a 2-week check
Right.
instead of
Mhm.
monthly, which is what we've been doing and will continue to do.
The next item I will just briefly mention, I guess, is the conflict of interest sections, all the way back on page 32.
There was a section in 306 on page 17.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. I must have missed it. 306B,
Yeah.
under the mayor's control was added. That's one of the comments there. There's also a comment, excuse me, that says, except those appointed by county legislative body resolution or contrary private act. I wasn't exactly sure as to where that was supposed to be inserted on 306. I'll just have to ask Jay about that, unless,
And it wouldn't be in the part here that talks about the individual departments.
It's kind of hanging out there. Section 307, right there on the bottom of page 17, Anderson County Law Director, Section A. Reference the private act there,
Right.
and I'll just mention the conflict of interest section on page 32. This is also discussed in the memorandum, and I've included the actual most recent public laws in the memorandum as to what exactly was changed. First of all, there was a section in subsection B on page 32. I'm looking here. I'm sorry, it was in D. Well, I'll do B first. To B, I added that sentence highlighted in red. That's now state law. It was currently in line, it was already in line with state law, but I've added that as just further clarification. Directly out of the statute. Unlawful to accept, receive, directly or indirectly from a person, firm, or corporation to which a contract or purchase order may be awarded, a gift, money, something like that. The statute reference is right there. And finally, in subsection D on page 33,
What page are you on, Jed?
page 33, sorry. In section D, it's kind of in the middle there, it's third line down. It says, if a member of the legislative body, kind of starts right there. That portion right there was what was recently passed in the General Assembly.
Yeah.
And that public chapter is included in this memorandum if you want to go take a look at it.
Yeah.
Where's that at?
It's
32?
in the charter, it's on page 33.
Yeah, on page 32.
Well, it starts
subheading
on
B.
32, D does.
So it's all part of D.
Correct. It's within D, it says, if a member of the legislative body who's voting on a budget it basically says they must declare the conflict of interest. And that's, the public chapter is
Right.
within the memorandum.
Yeah,
So-
they are their spouse, actually.
Yeah, you gave us a copy of that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I did. That's all I have for tonight. I think this is very close. I'll have to add the new member on the front page, of course. I've taken off, on page 40, I've taken off the signature lines, so you don't have to sign. But it does still have that section at the end there that basically says you all are fulfilling your duty. Do you all want me to
And
continue?
hereby submitted to the public for,
Yes.
Well-
I can continue to work work on some further disclaimer language if you want me to specify that.
Yes,
I can,
It's
yeah,
important
yes,
to-
yeah,
that'd be good.
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, because clearly, it's not the position of this charter to, as a charter member, to take a position for or against the charter, but only that we're only saying that it was done in accordance with proper procedure
Correct.
and in accordance with the requirements of state law.
Mhm. That's right.
Because our job is to present something to the public. And so we presented what we thought was as good as we could do, with the focus on changing absolutely nothing, that there wasn't a very strong reason to change anything. And if you look, like I've said this before, but as you look down through how the departments run, if you look down through how the sheriff, how everything is done, how the schools are run. We just didn't change anything. There are a few things we did change, and then the stuff we sent out to the people to help them understand what this thing does is we'll have to focus on, these are the things that changed.
Whenever the vote is taken on this charter, it may be beneficial to word the vote very
Now,
carefully.
the wording of the vote is prescribed by law, and it just says they either approve it or they don't approve the charter.
Yes,
Exactly.
so on the ballot,
The education part's what you're talking about.
well, what I'm talking about is whenever you all take a vote as to whether to put this, submit this to the people, maybe we could word the question very carefully and say, you know, all those in favor of submitting this to the people of Anderson County, you know, and specify that it's not a vote for or against the charter, but just to submit it in fulfillment of the duty,
To present a charter
To
to the
present the
people of Anderson
charter.
County.
Of
yeah,
this-
something
of this
like that, to
commission.
word it very carefully,
Yeah.
to get around maybe a no vote, so you can, you know, so if a commissioner does not want to vote for this charter, is not in favor of it, it's not a yes vote for the charter, it's a yes vote to fulfill the
It'll have to
duty.
be simple enough to where somebody that don't have a law degree or a nuclear scientist, it'll have to be that simple to where somebody
Sure.
can glance at it
Yeah.
and decipher right.
And then, primarily, that means it has to be short and concise.
Yeah. Yeah,
Court order, this is hereby set up, people of the public.
It has been assembled in accordance with the requirements of state law by the Charter Commission and to be submitted to the public for their decision or somewhere.
Let the council come up with
I'll come up
Yeah.
with something,
Yeah, he will.
I'll consult Jay on that
Yeah.
too, and he may have something better for that.
It'll be 3 paragraphs long.
Yeah.
We'll do our best.
I mean, we tried real hard, this commission tried really hard to not have a charter. Okay, you remember the courts wrangled with us for 2 years and finally said, no, you are hereby ordered. And I think all of us could have been arrested if we didn't come up with one.
We've been held in contempt, let's say that. Is that all you have?
That's all I
Tonight,
have, Mr.
Gavin.
Chairman. Yes, sir.
The next meeting will be Tuesday night.
16th.
I might have to go back through the notes unless somebody knows the time that we,
I'm thinking that one was 6, was that one 6 or is that one 5? It is, yeah, that one is 6.
right, 6 o'clock Tuesday night. And hopefully we'll have a full house.
Okay. Something else I just want to address before we adjourn is, I had some people at a meeting last night that talked with my wife, okay, and made claims that the reason people didn't attend Charter Commission meetings is that they were never announced or made public. And I just want to say for the record, and that is, of course, responsible for doing it, so I know she would not do anything wrong. The Charter Commission meetings were all noticed in accordance with state law. They were on the agendas, they were on the lists of the county calendars. They were all done and published in accordance with state law, every single one. Okay, now does that mean that there was a period of there was almost 2 years at one point where the courts were wrangled with whether or not we were gonna have to do this,
Right.
that we didn't have any meetings. So if people were looking for the meetings during that time, they did not find any. Because it is true, there was a long period of time that we had no meetings because we were waiting for the courts to rule on whether or not, because there was such a unanimous, well, almost unanimous decision amongst Charter Commission that we really didn't want to do a charter.
Well, I can truthfully say, they were all advertised.
Yeah.
And on every agenda, they were welcome, still are. say what they want, or make recommendations. We did everything that was begged and pleaded to get them in. And I can tell you that that was noted in the deposition that I gave when the suit was filed. And we encouraged it. Nobody showed up virtually to participate. But I will say this about the charter, and this is by no means not a recommendation for or against the charter. But I'll say this commission, with the help of our council and outside counsel, we've done our best to come up with something that, if it's approved, it won't be something that we'd be ashamed of or will cause us trouble in the future. That was the part we want to make sure we avoided. And I appreciate everybody that served on this commission.
With that being said, Mr. Chairman.
Got one question.
One,
There's already a petition going around to try to add term limits to the charter. So, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer to that, but just for the public, could you go over that, please?
Well, if there's already a petition to add term limits to the charter, like I said, this charter does not go into effect. Yes, sir.
No, but I had a question. The people that sent that out said this is not a petition, this is only a request. That was the wording that was put
It's
up.
a survey.
Yeah,
It's a
that's not
survey.
That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's a difference between a petition.
I know that, that's not what I'm talking about. There's been a group come to me that's forming a petition. It's not the one from the Republican
okay.
Party, let's get that straight. It's because a group has come to my shop and said,
Oh,
we're
okay.
going to put a petition together. And I said, I will ask the counselor, the attorney, so he can tell you, instead of just coming from me. So that's where it's coming from.
Okay, that's fine.
what goes in this charter has to come through this commission.
That's my understanding.
And it
Yeah.
has to be submitted very shortly.
So if there is a petition.
And I will say this, at the last meeting, we heard from someone that they came, they let it be known that they were against term limits. Is that not right?
Yeah.
That's correct.
At a county level.
And we haven't had anybody to stand for that podium and say they were for term limits. So it's not that we're not trying to do the will of the people.
Yes, my understanding is, anything that goes into this charter has to come through this commission, just like the chairman said, and that once this charter is voted on, if it passes on November 8th, it won't go into effect until after the current term of the county commissioners. September 1st, 2026 is when it will go into effect. To amend it thereafter, you would have to follow the provisions of the charter to amend it. Now, like Jay said last Tuesday, there's 4 or 5 ways to do that. It's through the Charter Review Committee or this committee that will be in existence until 2032, I think. Through that, or through the county legislative body, or a referendum of voters, if enough people sign a petition. But that nothing will be able to be changed in this until
Until the charter.
until it's in effect, if it's adopted, correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Hearing none, I accept the motion to adjourn, and we'll see you Tuesday night, 6. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.